Kia ora and welcome from New Zealand. Today I have the pleasure of sharing with you all the findings of my PhD research, I Forget I Have a Disability. In 2021, I presented at the VISTA conference presenting the ideas and the concept for this research, and today I'm here to share with you these findings. This research drew on the social relational model of disability. It gave agency to the voices of young people with impairments, their parents, and coaches and leaders. Through their lived experiences in sport and active recreation, participants presented unique narratives on how participating with non-disabled young people have shaped their experiences. I have sought to understand how sports organisations can improve opportunities for young people with impairments participation within a sports system dominated by ableism and where discrimination through disableism goes unchallenged. My research design and methodology. Case studies offered the best method for capturing lived experiences in sport. This methodology enabled me to use corroborating information from conversations with parents and coaches and leaders, as well as historical and current document analysis. Recruiting and engaging participants, although impacted by COVID-19, was still achieved, albeit using digital technology rather than face-to-face meetings. 4 young people with impairments were recruited. They had varying ages, gender, location of residence, impairment, and the sports that they were participating in. This breadth of participants was sufficient for cross-case analysis and the construction of generalised findings. Common themes constructed from this cross-case analysis were acknowledged by these young people as reflective of their lived experiences. The New Zealand disability sport landscape can be best described as ableism in action. And in addition to the case studies, I examined the history of the New Zealand government's involvement in disability sport. From the succession of disability sport policies and repeated attempts to increase participation and improve opportunities for young people with impairments, it became evident that this intent to improve the lives of disabled people in sport was distinctly different from non-disabled sport. The gap can be best described as enlightened ableism, and if you want to find out more about that, the references are at the end, but it's Lyons 2013. Despite strong commitment to progress opportunities for disabled people, direct impact of government policy and government agencies has been inhibited by shifting discourses related to disability and over-reliance on disability sports organisations, and an absence of unified policy and provision, policy leadership, and targeted funding. Evaluating the effectiveness of policy was compounded by the lack of up-to-date evidence on sustained participation in sport by disabled people, and on the articulations between policy and practice across the sport system. In relation to inclusion, successive policies touched on this as the ultimate outcome, but delivery of disability sport remains a segregated model. The young people narrated in their own voice their experiences. They exuded positivity about sport participation and experiences. The opportunities to participate in sport were welcomed, and the challenges were referenced by these young people. These young people and their families described how participation in sport brings positive outcomes, while acknowledging these experiences may require more support than non-disabled participants. The stories provided valuable and enlightening contrast to the much researched barriers and constraints to participation that we often read about. Through positive and super supportive parents, Seed King et al. 2003, And Coach and Leadership Understanding and Education, Townsend et al., 2021, these young people are direct beneficiaries of social transformation, as you can see by these quotes on the screen. As evidenced by these 4 young people with impairments who are participating in sport in New Zealand, it's often in spite of, rather than because of, conscious decisions by sports organisations to provide disability sport opportunities. Key issues for disabled young people include a reduced range of choice and opportunities to participate. Disability sport is often the only option for many, and for some it is ideal, but for others not so. And not being able to access mainstream or other opportunities, and a heavy reliance on government funding to support disability sport is a denial of human rights. Case studies provided insight into each young person with impairments' involvement in sport, what it means to them, and their future aspirations. In addition, conversations with their parents and coaches and leaders highlighted the impact ableism continues to impose on young people with impairments participation, reflective of a landscape in which disability sport has evolved in New Zealand. Sport organisations would benefit from guidance on how to go further to benefit and better situate disability sport and young people with impairments within their organisation and remove the discrimination of disableism. Leading from that brings me towards an anti-ableist sports system. So the anti-ableist sports system, individually, no one inclusion model provides sufficient understanding of factors that contribute to the participation of young people with disabilities in sport in New Zealand. Most models, created from a participant perspective, have failed to translate well for deliverers of sport and active recreation opportunities. The purpose of my research, therefore, was to help improve the provision of sport opportunities and also improve the quality experiences for young people with impairments. To attain an anti-ableist sports system that provides opportunities for all young people, including young people with impairments, I present a framework that encapsulates the tenets created from the case studies, the historical document analysis, and underpinned by the principles of the social relational model of disability. The anti-ableist framework signals how simply system-wide change can occur, how active change agents, whether they're parents, coaches, sports administrators, can work individually and collaboratively to take small steps towards being anti-ableist. Furthermore, by making change at an individual level, we can create the catalyst for further and more wide-reaching changes in the organisation and system levels. If many of us choose to make an informed and conscious decision to reframe disability and reposition young people's impairments within sport, opportunities for these young people will be immediately improved and ultimately will lead to a system-wide change. So you're asking, what is this anti-ableist framework? So the anti-ableist framework aligns with the social ecological model. In situating my framework from an individual perspective, i.e. microsystem, to the system level macrosystem, often described more simply as bottom-up rather than top-down, I present disability sport as multifaceted and overlapping. Each level, individual, organisation, and system are intricately intertwined. In illustrating the framework in this way, it highlights that sector change cannot occur in isolation at one level, but is reliant on change occurring across all levels. From the individual level, understanding how young people want to be seen, why they want to participate in sport and active recreation, and the structures that support this participation is no different from non-disabled participants. By centralising the young person and their impairment and better appreciating the barriers and constraints to participation, an anti-ableist sports system can be created where all participants are treated equally, with respect and dignity, and their voices would be heard. Sports organisations have a responsibility to review their rules and regulations to ensure these are enacted in ways that provide equitable access and positive experiences and outcomes for young people with impairments at all levels. Paying attention to design and delivery that reduces any impairment effect will overcome many of the barriers and constraints experienced by young people's impairments. Finally, the system level. Understanding, flexibility, and accessibility are fundamental for young people with impairments participation in sport. To support the establishment of cohesive and an anti-ableist sports system where young people with impairments have parity with the non-disabled young people, doing what is right needs to take precedence over what might be the legal minimum. Relying on a top-down approach only has been counterproductive and has only achieved further discrimination and enlightened ableism. So ableism, discrimination, and bias are inherent within the sports system that prioritises normal athleticism over the right to participate. Presumptions of ability at a macro level define the framework within which sport is delivered. Yet, at the micro level, for young people with impairments to participate, the effect of impairment has an individual and personal impact, illustrative of the social model of disability. Using impairment to preclude young people with impairments from participating inhibits choice, a fundamental principle of an inclusive sports system. Without adjusting the delivery of sport from one framed around activity modification and adaptation to one addressing system-wide evolution, opportunities for young people with impairments will remain constrained by disableism. Integral to the equitable provision of sport is replacing this discriminatory and ableist system with one that endorses, values, and supports the rights of disabled people in sport. To achieve this transformation, a dual approach recognising the importance of using both the bottom-up, local-level approaches at the same time as implementing top-down policies should lower barriers to participation and enhance opportunities for young people with impairments. So in conclusion, I believed that changing opportunities for young people with impairments was straightforward. And at a local level, this is true. This is where I work at a local level. But at a macro system-wide level, there is far more complexity to be overcome. The dominance of ableism and the acceptance of disableism is systematic and requires multi-level attention. Understanding disability, impairment, and impairment effects on participation requires greater education of policymakers, sports administrators and officials, coaches and leaders, and parents of non-disabled participants. The desire from government to effect social change has not been sufficient to effectively entice sports organisations to improve how sport is delivered to young people with impairments. While there is more action needed at these levels of a sports system to improve the opportunities for young people with impairments in sport, this framework, I believe, provides a good starting point. Finally, if we collectively choose to reframe disability and reposition young people with impairments opportunities will improve immediately and a system-wide change will follow. And for those who are interested in the references, I will just quickly put those up for you so you can take a copy. But thank you for the opportunity to present the findings of my PhD thesis, and hopefully this will incite some more thinking around how policy is positioned with the assumptions of making change when what has been found in New Zealand here, the intent is often not the outcome. Thank you again. Ka kite anō.